Imagine a world where a simple scratched knee could kill your child, where routine surgery becomes impossible despite modern hospitals and skilled doctors. Imagine a world where treatable cancers become death sentence. This is not a war zone, a faraway country, or medieval Europe. This is today's Europe if essential medicines disappear. Right now, here in Austria, one of the most developed countries on this planet, almost 500 medicines are unavailable or only partly accessible. The situation is quite similar in Germany, in France, in Portugal, in the UK, US, you name it. And we're not talking experimental therapy or luxury treatments. Quite to the contrary, we are talking about everyday medicines, about antibiotics, about painkillers, blood pressure medication, or insulin that's keeping diabetics alive. When medicines aren't there, people suffer and people die. It's as brutally simple as that. But here is what gives me hope. Discovering these vulnerabilities forces us to totally reimagine how we make medicines. And this revolution, it has already begun. Today, 70% of our active pharmaceutical ingredients come from just two countries, China and India. For the chemical precursors that make those ingredients, it's almost 80%. So just think about this for a moment. 80% of the basic building blocks of European medicines come exclusively from the other side of the planet, vulnerable to everything from factory fires to floods, from pandemics to trade wars. It costs about 20 to 50% more to make medicines in Europe, mostly because of higher labor costs, higher energy costs, but also stricter environmental or work safety standards. So pharma companies move their production abroad, or they buy their ingredients at the cheapest generic manufacturer they can find. Here's an interesting fact. Austria actually hosts Europe's only remaining fully integrated production plant for penicillin, which is a very important class of antibiotics. This one single factory makes enough penicillin to cover all of Europe's needs. But to keep it competitive against Asian producers, the EU and the Austrian government together had to provide 50 million euros. When you go into a pharmacy, you can buy a pack of over-the-counter painkillers for 3 or 5 euros. This includes multiple steps of production, packaging, labeling, storage, delivery, the pharmacy. That's really great, right? I mean, healthcare got so super expensive, so at least some things get really cheap. But wait. When COVID hit, this whole cart of house collapsed. Production facilities shut down, borders closed. Countries kept medicines produced locally for their own people. And suddenly, we discovered that efficiency without resilience is just fragility with a nicer name. But the problem actually runs much deeper than geography. Traditional pharmaceutical manufacturing is stuck in the 1970s. Making a batch of pills can actually take up to 6, even 12 months if you have made this product in your facility before. If this medicine is new to your facility, add another 6 to 18 months for setup and regulatory approval. So this doesn't sound exactly like you could trigger off an emergency mechanism to produce what's desperately needed, right? The EU finally woke up. In 2023, they made a very long list of critical medicines. It's essentially our pharmaceutical most wanted list. And they're working on something which they call the Critical Medicines Act. It's designed to boost local production and to create strategic stockpiles of the most essential medicines. But there's a problem with traditional stockpiling. Medicines expire. They have a shelf life of 2 to 3 years typically. And only a very small percentage of such a pill is the active ingredient. There's lots of fillers, binders, coaters, colorants, and other things you need to make this tablet work. And of course, a lot of packaging. So we would need massive warehouses constantly rotating stocks, throwing away billions worth of expired medication. But we're already facing shortages. So doing a lot of stockpiling would actually make our shortages worse. But the EU said at least you need to know when you're heading for trouble. So they have a reporting system. And the problem is that every country has their own definition of what and when to report. Companies are supposed to report at least serious shortages a few months in advance. In reality, more than half of the shortages are reported when they're already there or after they have happened. So what if we could flip the script completely? If we wouldn't store the bulky finished products that expire within a few years, but we would just store the pure, compact, active ingredients. And if we had like super special, ultra long storage containers where they would be stable for 20, 30 years, that would be cool, right? And then when a crisis was there or a shortage, we could not just reach for the pre-made pills, but we could also make them locally in Europe, where we are. But maybe with a new technology, which is modern and streamlined. Let's call it continuous manufacturing. And here's the math. So traditional batch takes 6 to 12 months. If you use continuous manufacturing from stored ingredients, this could be operational within maybe 1 or 2 weeks. And if it's well prepared, of course. And it could produce 10 million tablets a week easily. A traditional big pharma plant costs several hundreds millions of euros and covers many, many acres. Continuous manufacturing facilities could be built for maybe 50 million euros and are the size of a basketball court. This technology actually is not imaginary. It's not theoretical. It actually exists. Interestingly, most of it has been invented right here in Graz. So I think we should be planning and building such facilities fast and have them operational all across Europe within a few years. And here's something else that makes me think. While we're desperately short on medicines, at the same time, we are burning huge quantities of pharmaceutical ingredients from either expired medicines or out of specification production batches that failed. So while we recycle everything from paper to glass and all sorts of waste, we still incinerate billions worth of pharmaceutical ingredients as toxic waste. Although some of those ingredients can be worth more than gold per gram. So I can also imagine using a failed production batch as the foundation for the next successful production run, or turning an expired antibiotics into raw materials to make new antibiotics instead of running into the next shortage. There are some catches that come with it, I have to admit. First is the technological challenge. So you have a very complex tablet and you need to extract the pure ingredient out of it. The good news is that for most compounds, this should be technically feasible and first results are very promising. The even better news is I know some brilliant pharmaceutical engineers who would love to solve this with just a teeny tiny bit of research money. Number 2 is the economics. Does it make financial sense to recycle every compound? Certainly not. But for expensive cancer drugs, for example, or for antibiotics before we run into the next shortage, absolutely so, especially when you factor in the social cost of medicine shortages, which means canceled surgery, delayed treatments, and human suffering. Third is the regulatory challenge, or rather, the regulatory nightmare of pharma recycling. We need regulators to team up, especially the European Medicine Agency, to come up with frameworks that balance safety and sustainability. And most of all, we need a true single market in the EU, not 27 regulators coming up with 27 frameworks for packaging, labeling, and reimbursement of medications. This complicates trade and redistribution, not just in crisis, but always. But why is not all of this happening already? Well, pharma companies actually are not held responsible for providing secure supplies. They operate like any other business. They buy for the lowest cost and sell for the highest price. Sometimes they even profit from scarcity. But the real obstacle is that our government and insurance systems have trained us to prioritize price over resilience. We seek the cheapest medicines, not the most robust supply chains. The uncomfortable truth is supply chain security costs money, just like energy security or military defense. And I think we had some really tough wake-up calls recently, which made us see that energy safety and military defense are national priorities. And medicine safety needs to get and deserves the same attention and mindset as those. If we want robust pharmaceutical supply chains, we need to be willing to invest a little bit more, including in the production of both ingredients and medicines in Europe, always or at least as an emergency response mechanism. In the EU, we're spending 1.6 trillion euros on healthcare per year, each and every year. That's about 10% of our GDPR. And it's even more than 10% of GDP in Austria, for example. If we are willing to use just a teeny tiny bit of this amount to invest in more robust healthcare supply chains, medicine shortages would be eliminated permanently. What this needs, however, is governments that invest in research and in innovative manufacturing capabilities, public procurement policies that value resilience and sustainability alongside price, regulators that embrace innovation, EU cooperation, not 27 national approaches. The technology is there. Continuous manufacturing is proven. Smart storage containers are being developed, and pharma recycling is scientifically sound. The only ingredient we're missing in this formulation is political will. 10 years from now, I want to tell you a different story. 10 years from now, our healthcare no longer depends on whether a facility in China decides to maintain production or whether a container ship made it through the Suez Canal on time. Tomorrow's healthcare depends on local resilience, innovative and smart technology, and on the recognition that there is a right to have a fundamental right to have access to medicine. This is not a privilege that depends on a global supply chain lottery. 10 years from now, when a little girl in Vienna gets a purulent ear infection, her pediatrician prescribes her the right antibiotic. It's produced in Europe, and her parents can pick it up at their neighborhood pharmacy that same day. The cancer patient in Berlin, his chemotherapy continues uninterrupted because there's active ingredients stored securely in European facilities, and it's ready to be processed into life-saving treatments in case international supply chains fail. The surgeon in Paris, she operates knowing all necessary medication is there. It's produced in Europe, maybe even locally, with the highest quality and environmental standards, and some might even come from recycled pharmaceutical products. This future is not science fiction. This future is engineering, and it's political will. But most of all, it's our choice. Thank you.